Hi, welcome to What's Next, the interview series from Balderton Capital on deep technology. My name is Suranga. I'm a partner here at Balderton, and today I'm going to talk to May Habib. May is the founder and CEO of Writer, and Writer is a full-stack GenAI platform that's actually being used by tens of Fortune 500 companies right now. Let's talk to May and hear about how generative AI is already changing businesses. Hi, May. Welcome to Balderton's offices and welcome to What's Next.
Thanks for having me, Suranga.
So, as you know, we're doing an interview series where we're talking to CEOs and founders of really the most technically interesting companies that we're meeting here in Europe and the US. And you are one of those CEOs, and very luckily for us, you happen to be in our portfolio as well. So I guess before we get too deep into things, it would be great for you to maybe tell us a little bit about what Writer is. Writer is your company. Tell us, in as short a way as you can, like what Writer's focus is right now.
Yeah. So we are a full stack generative AI company. So what that means is we combine large language models, state-of-the-art models that we build, with the tooling that enterprises need to really be able to build very useful AI applications and workflows. We believe that competitive advantage in generative AI is going to come not from 2 or 3 AI applications in a business, but hundreds and thousands of AI workflows that are reinvented. And to really be able to do things at that scale, you need a platform to be able to build, to be able to maintain, to be able to manage all of those applications. So we, in addition to the large language models, have built-in RAG pipelines that are use case by use case. And we do graph-based RAG versus vector DB-based RAG, which means for enterprise use cases that we focus on that are really complex from a data perspective. So the data is multimodal, it's messy, it comes in lots of different formats. And from an accuracy perspective and a quality perspective, you can't be wrong, either because there isn't a human in the loop or because being wrong is really, really hard on adoption, right? The user just won't use it. For those types of use cases, there's a lot of data that needs to be built into RAG solutions. And without a solution like ours, it becomes really complex to build and maintain and scale them. There are reusable AI guardrails. So whether they are compliance or brand or editorial, across hundreds and thousands of applications, you don't want to be rebuilding all of that logic. We use LLMs for that logic, but they're reusable and WYSIWYG and super easy to apply.
Okay, great. So listening to you talk about that, I think a lot of what you're talking about is I guess sort of the enterprise reality of these things, right? So generative AI bursts on the scene, 18 months, 2 years ago. People immediately get a sense of how powerful this could be and how it could lead to the automation of a variety of different tasks across an enterprise. Tasks that until now have been entirely human or mainly human. And that's great, and you get that initial excitement. But I guess once that excitement starts to dissipate, what you're left with is the reality of, okay, but I'm a big company. I've got rules, I have regulations, I have certain levels of quality and standards that I want to adhere to. How do I actually deploy this in a repeatable, yes, scalable, yes, automated, but kind of consistent way that I know I can trust, I guess.
Yeah.
And am I getting it right that that's really
absolutely.
what you're providing? Yeah.
The LLM is a non-deterministic technology, and you got to get deterministic outputs right. on the back end. And I think it can be really misleading how easy it is to get to 70, 80%, right? Like getting to okay or like, wow, we should invest here is very fast. Getting to shippable and production grade is very, very hard.
Yeah. So talk about how you and your co-founder came up with, realized that was going to be the challenge, because now it seems obvious, but I think when you were starting the company, it was less obvious. So what was the journey to starting the company, and how do you think that's the bit we need to focus on?
Yeah, it's felt like a real consistent sense of just innovating at breakneck speed really since the founding 3.5 years ago. But the genesis was our first company, which is in the machine translation space. And we discovered transformers in building machine translation statistically, right? And it became very clear to us that was going to be a massive business. This is late 2019.
Right. So this is quite cool, right?
Yeah.
Because you've got this like moment in time where nobody else has really woken up to this, but you guys are getting excited.
We're getting really excited.
Yeah.
And initially we had actually said, well, what if we use transformers to clean up the English language, right, content before it went into translate it? to translation, as a way to apply it, because we were like so amazed by what transformers could do. And we quickly, well, maybe not as quickly as I would have liked to admit, but like it really dawned on us that this was a completely different solution, completely different product. So we started Writer in January 2020, and that first year was a real existential crisis, actually, of whether we were a consumer or enterprise company, right? How were we going to actually productize this technology? Yeah. And I remember taking long walks in the Presidio and like truly trying to meditate on like, do I want to run a consumer company, right, versus an enterprise company? And our first company sold to large enterprises. Visa had been a customer, so we knew that space and it felt very comfortable. But this definitely felt like a technology that end users needed to love, right? And the name Writer we chose because we started the company because we knew that machines were going to be better than people at reading and writing, but you have to bring people along in that process, right? Now, years later, right, we are so much faster kind of ticking off the things that had been on our vision maps, right, than we thought. So now natural language is not just the, written word that gets improved or generated by AI, but it's actually the new code for application building.
Right.
And so when you kind of open up a really sophisticated application that we built for somebody, like the way that the prompts are chained and the way that you introduce various models and their capabilities, the way you ground it, the way you connect it to knowledge, all of that is described with words and not code, right? And it's a really exciting moment, but we definitely got to that much faster than we thought we would. We got to 32 languages via transformers faster than we thought we would. So it's been an amazing last few years, and in a lot of ways, both missions of both companies have kind of merged into one. Really just completely swept away by just how powerful the technology is.
Yeah. If it's okay, I'd love to focus on that moment though, because I've met a few people over the years who've had the privilege, I guess, and the luck of being in that moment in time where you realize you're working on something that's going to change everything. So for example, I met one of the original design engineers on the first Apple Mac once, right? And he was a super junior guy. But there was apparently a point in time in that project where it was, for many years, it looked like a death march. It wasn't going anywhere. And then there was a moment where it all started to come together and people said, like, oh my God, we are building something that, like regular people are going to want to put on their desk, and teenagers are going to use this and kids are going to use this. And what happens when everybody has a computer like that, mind blown moments. Yeah. And you got to live through one of those. And what was that like? I mean, did it feel exciting? Were you nervous about, well, how can I make the most of this? Or talk to us about that.
Well, I think for the whole world, and this made kind of our consumer versus enterprise kind of existential crisis, I think, really poignant. It was really when it became a consumer phenomenon, right, with the launch of ChatGPT, that it became obvious to everybody that we had been selling to what we had seen, for the previous year and a half, 2 years. And our early customers started calling themselves Writer OGs, right? Like, so if you were the buyer at Accenture or the buyer at UiPath who had chosen Writer before ChatGPT, right? It was like, whoa, you saw something before everybody else. And they were very proud of that, rightfully. So that really was the seminal moment, right, for the industry. I think for us internally, it came in spurts. It came in United Healthcare coming in inbound, one of the largest companies in the world. Folks at Accenture who are really, really like innovative and have high standards. This is on the marketing side. We're now kind of across the company, but at the very beginning we had started in marketing, saying, "Wow, this is amazing. You need to show this to more people," right? And it was, I think, a series of folks being really impressed, but then also faced with a lot of criticism and pushback internally, right? And it wasn't until the risk factors for this type of technology, or at least the perceived risk factors, and maybe even FOMO associated with it, kind of went way up because of ChatGPT, did the whole thing really explode.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. And I guess in a way that's that's great because it gave you a bit of time to get ready for that wave,
Yes.
I
Yeah.
suppose, right?
That's how I think about it as well,
Yeah.
Saranga, truly, because, and this is why I think folks feel like the platform itself is so visionary, and the way that people can collaborate on the prompting and people can collaborate on how the applications get designed, and just the interaction between the AI engineer and the person with the business context. Like, we've been working on that problem for years, before this moment. And so it is much faster time to value to the customer to be able to deploy a solution that, we've just thought about for longer than most people.
Yeah. Which is the old cliche, right? Every overnight success took 10 years or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
Right.
What I'd love to do in talking about your product and technology is both go broad and deep. So we'll do one at a time. So broad, first of all, it sounds like one of the key things. Well, I know that one of the key things that sort of writer thinks about is that in the end, an enterprise is going to use AI and generative AI in many different applications across different departments, different divisions for quite different use cases. But actually, rather than buying a whole bunch of separate, disparate, siloed solutions to each of these, it makes way more sense to have a single platform. And of course, on that platform, you build quite targeted things, but
Yeah.
there's a shared platform, right? Talk to me a little bit about why that's the way to do it, like why you think that's the smart way of doing it. If you're an enterprise, like why should you do it that way? And secondly, what have you had to build as a company from a product point of view to build this like enterprise broad platform?
Yeah, really, really great question. So, first, for a enterprise, their data and the security of that data is of utmost concern. So, if you are Kenvue or if you are Mars and you want to use AI to help people develop new products, right? This is literally the core of their operation, right? All of your user interviews and focus groups and every brief anyone has ever written, that is IP. And when you think about the pipelines that are required to build high quality applications, most people today are sending their data to an LLM and an embeddings model, right? Or like a hosted service and a vector database, again, as a hosted service. And then they might be building their own applications on top. So you're also then responsible for inference in an application layer. And even that world of use cases, right, around product development might actually have, it might actually make sense, as it does for a lot of our customers, to build multiple applications, right, that address that kind of universe of problems inside of a company. And so when you think about the data problem, and then you think about the kind of multitude of apps and workflows problem, having an engine to build those, some of them might be like one-time or composable, right? One-time use software, versus needing to go out and procure, right? Or build from scratch, really becomes pretty prohibitive to actually realizing that value. And so for us, we have built the building blocks of text generation, text analysis and insight, and then analytics, right? And that's mostly kind of tabular data and more structured data.
Okay.
And so from a horizontal perspective, it means a customer can build an application that reviews job descriptions and generates them, to applications that can go through 3 decades of market research on Listerine, right? To support a marketer coming up with new briefs or scientists coming up with new formulations. Okay. And so when you do it on a single platform with shared building blocks, you develop the internal expertise from prompt crafting and writing to which models, right, exhibit what behaviors, to what kinds of inputs do I need from a user depending on the use case and how I architect that. With Writer, we've moved beyond the chat app. So not everything has to be a dialogue, right? Sometimes you've got UIs. And so we put all those building blocks in front of a user. So they are hours or days away from putting a use case in front of users versus months and quarters with a DIY approach.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it's really about thinking, okay, there's all these different ways one might use it. Can you abstract those back down to the key functions or building blocks that really are the transactions that matter, right? Generate a bit of text, or understand this piece of text, or understand this table, and then first of all, that increases speed to market, right? So the enterprise can just build the product or the application or the tool it wants to really quickly. But secondly, as you say, because everyone's doing it using the same toolkit, you're actually enriching your expertise with that toolkit and
Yes.
making it better over time. Yeah. Very, very powerful. And then I want to go deep as well.
Yeah.
So if you were to pick, any customer in any application, you don't have to give us the exact name of the company if that's sensitive. Can you just go deep on like a great example of how someone's using Writer in a way that you think is generating value already for them today, and you think will sort of endurably do that in the future? Like a really, really good, because AI is one of these areas where there are a lot of great ideas, but surprisingly few, great examples of just concrete, this is working and it's working really well.
Yeah.
But I know that your company is one of the companies that does get exposure to that. So
Yeah.
tell us.
We're really lucky. I mean, it's both the platform and then the customers who are innovative enough to disrupt their existing workflows, because it's relatively straightforward to say, here's a process that's got 8 steps, and every step we are going to, have AI augment. It's very different to take 8 steps and say, how do we make them 3 steps and completely reinvent the process? And so maybe I'll give an example of both a productivity use case, so kind of speeding things up, and then a revenue generating or growth use case, because they're it's 2 very different types of use cases usually. So on the like really going deep on productivity improvements, I think CPG companies have done an incredible job using our platform to reinvent how they get SKUs to market.
Okay.
So let's say you are a consumer packaged goods company.
Yeah.
So the folks who make the stuff that is inside of CVS and inside of their customer too. But like, let's take the manufacturers, right?
Right.
AI is an incredible enabler of much faster time to market for all of those products. So when you are launching a new product, for example, it might be a year of upfront work to create all of the assets, all of the branding, all the SEO, all of the content for the regulators, right? All of the content for the retailers on how to actually position and sell this this product. And all of that has to be reviewed for legal, for brand, right? And and by market. So this is being done across dozens of regions across the world, right? And so with AI, what we have been able to do for a number of these CPG customers and dozens of their brands is completely reinvent that process. So rather than it taking 4 to 5 months and you're using agencies and external contractors and it is a ton of back and forth, there is a real compression of that whole workflow by taking into account all the legal concerns right at the generation, all the brand concerns right at the generation, all of the market ways in which it needs to be localized, right? Not just for language, but for local market understanding. Right. All of that gets built into the model. So all of those assets are produced from day one with all of those considerations built in already. And that's not, you don't get there with like prompting alone. Right. It's a real understanding of what is actually happening, a real synthesizing of the data that has gone before, and really using LLMs that are sequenced against the right problems, right? And building that from scratch. And you also need executives who can oversee and who've got oversight over the whole chain, because most people will only know the step that came before their step and the step that comes after, and not actually have the big picture. And so the real reinvention, and going deep does require, like really strategizing around what is our business process today end to end. Most people wouldn't just be able to draw it for you. There's a real business process mapping that needs to happen. And then how are we going to actually put AI against this problem? So we have a lot of solution architects on our team. We screen for business acumen and really being able to get to the heart of a matter. And we can tell somebody if what they're doing is, not like lipstick on a pig AI, but just like, 1 inch deep versus really a mile deep. And they may not have the political capital to go a mile deep. They may not have the appetite right now. There may not be the adoption required, right? But especially when you've got that desire, right? And we've got the technology and the expertise, the results are really incredible.
Yeah. That's so. Just that one answer has triggered about 10 different questions for me. But just maybe I'll pick 1 or 2. So that point you made is actually a really interesting one, which is that in a large organization, like a big consumer packaged goods company. So, we're thinking about a company that might make, I don't know, food products you could buy at a supermarket, or kind of
Self-care
drugstore
products.
products or
Yep.
self-care products, whatever. And today, one of the reasons they're so good at what they do is they have really, packaged that process of creating a new brand and a new product, right? And they've got specialists who, do this kind of product in Germany or this kind of product in France. And then when they trigger off something new, each person, as you say, focuses on their particular piece, and they do that. And one of the interesting things about AI is that it rewires that entire process potentially, right?
100%.
You may do things in a different order. You may do certain things at the same time rather than separately.
You could take, manufacturing attributes
Yeah.
and then brand guidelines that literally sit in a PowerPoint and create all of the packaging copy, which we have done.
Wow.
Right.
Amazing.
Instead of not having done that until month three of a process, right?
Yeah.
And having that be sort of a process that has to happen ground up.
Yep.
It's completely isolated from all of the core assets that you've produced already.
Yeah. And this is why I find what you're doing is really interesting, because what you're describing really is a challenge. The challenge at the heart of all of that isn't a technical challenge. It's a sort of people challenge, right?
Yeah.
It's an interface with AI challenge,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
And if you look at some of the companies that are doing, AI in markets where they're not yet generating revenue, where they don't yet have customers. So whether it's robotics or self-driving cars or whatever, the big challenge I think a lot of them are going to face is the moment where it becomes real, right?
Yeah.
Where they say, okay, it's great, you've got this thing that works in the lab, and maybe it works, 99.99%, and that's better than any human. But now humans are going to come across it, and how are they going to react to that? And you're living that reality right now.
And I think for us, it is both a reflection of who we are and what we want to build in the world.
Okay.
Right. Our vision is enable people and transform work. And everything from like robot emoji to the anthropomorphization of AI is banned at Ryder.
Interesting.
Right? This is, we're never going to call AI employees or your AI colleague. Right. It's about empowering the humans at the heart of an operation to use AI to make their processes much better.
Yeah.
But from a commercialization perspective, right? I think selling LLMs is going to be a losing proposition because like just pure API access to them. And that, obviously OpenAI is at a multi-billion-dollar run rate. So it sounds crazy saying that, but all of
just a little.
The hyperscalers are incentivized to go scorched earth on making all of this free.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Essentially free. And I think the much bigger trillion-dollar markets to be built are in that interface, taking this incredible utility, right? And actually putting it to work. If AI is a free-flowing river, right? How do you build all of the paths to that river inside of a company? Yeah. Right. That's the transformation potential. Yeah. Because if LLMs were all that we needed, we've got incredible ones that pass the MCAT and the LSAT already. Yeah. How do you actually put them to use? Most people have not begun climbing that mountain yet.
Right. That's really interesting. And actually, history shows that the hyperscalers are really good at that kind of utility creation, right? Yeah. And in the end, they make it super cheap and they make it very accessible, but they are not very good at building the actual end solutions, right? So
they have to build for lowest common denominator, denominator. Yeah. And the customers know that, right? Yeah. And at the end, like you're going to be, aside from compute, anything else you're paying the hyperscalers for pales in comparison
to what you could get elsewhere. Yeah, absolutely. And then, so the other question area that kind of came out of your description of the CPG group is around how you help codify the restrictions that need to exist, right? So that, let's talk about hallucinations, right? Yeah. So it's great that you can take this product idea and start with regulatory descriptions or whatever, and then start to create creative, marketing content from that. But there are limits, right? So there are things you're not allowed to say because they're not true, or there are things you don't want to say because they're off brand or whatever. Yeah. So, and as you said, there's all kinds of complexity once you get into multiple markets, because a name that works in Germany doesn't work in France or whatever it might be. And so how does Writer help an enterprise kind of let the AI loose when it should, but also rein the AI in when it needs to?
Yeah. So in CPG and in life sciences, those are called claims, kind of claims management. Yeah. So what are the claims I'm allowed to make about something? And that is a really good category of things to put as a guardrail, right?
Okay.
And it's a really good category of problems for LLMs. Like we have been in rules-based ML before, right? As a company and as entrepreneurs, and being able to say, don't use idioms instead of having to list out the idioms is so powerful, right?
Yeah.
But then of course, not just a simple prompt like that, but really making that concept work and be repeatable and very consistent and something that regulators can actually review. In financial services, the analogy is promissory language. So companies can get fined tens of millions of dollars for making a mortgage seem cheap or a credit card seem really easy. And again, cheap and easy are easy to put on a block list, but there's a lot of marketing language and just kind of consumer language that can actually get people in trouble.
Yeah.
And so building those into Writer as AI guardrails in pretty sophisticated ways that can be reused really speeds up, how you bring AI into the company. Another tech set of kind of tech features and innovations for us have to do with just how you ground the actual digital assistant sessions, whether it's using kind of our general digital assistant or one that you've built for the company for a specific use case with the data that it is tied to.
Okay.
So literally not just like, here is a 40-page document that the answer is in somewhere, but like down to the passage level, down to a reasoning level. So I literally, in natural language, the model describing to you, we put these 3 passages together and then a subquery of your question implied this. And so we looked at that.
Right.
And so being able to actually get help with how the model reasoned around a query is incredibly powerful. And we put those UIs in front of people. There's APIs against them too, so the customer can actually embed that into their own workflow or experience.
Right. So it's both having the guardrails, but then also being able to understand how and when they were applied and post hoc analyze that and just have the full control.
Yeah, and not just the guardrails, but the underlying data.
Yeah, and the data itself. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. And then you're going to talk about another deep example that's more revenue generating.
On the revenue generating front. And that's important because obviously faster time to market is especially in pharma, right? You've got 17 years on a patent. If you can be in the market for an extra year, that is, literally hundreds of millions of revenue for people.
Yeah.
But efficiency isn't always tied so cleanly to, a big sum of money. And I think for a lot of our customers, it's important for the executives to see, right, how they'll actually be able to grow with AI. And the family of use cases that we love have to do with call centers, because if you're a wealth manager and you've got folks who have to pass the Series 7 and the Series 63 in the US to answer Suranga Chandratillake about, his portfolio so that they can answer questions for you. And you now can have them answer questions for both Suranga and May because they've got the tools at their fingertips to be able to analyze not just like your type of portfolio, but my type of portfolio, or not just your type of product, but my type of product. It's incredibly powerful for the company. If you can, shave wait time off of somebody who now needs to be transferred to the right specialist, right? If you can make your specialists much more multifunction, it's incredibly lucrative to companies, not just because they're saving money, but now, I might have you on the phone and I can actually pitch you something, that you may not necessarily have access to.
Right.
So it's data that doesn't exist cleanly yet, right?
Okay.
So like in the CPG example, maybe what legal reviews content for is sitting in legal's head, actually, and we have to draw that out, right? In a make more money example, what makes one person better than somebody else, they themselves may not even be able to articulate. And so the kinds of like chair sides that we do to actually understand, like, you want wealth manager who's been on the job 6 months to be as good as someone who's been on the job 6 years, right? How can we tell what makes somebody good? Again, back to your, business process and people questions, like those really are business process and people questions. But it's important for teams to start to see AI hit the P&L. Like I get asked this question by board members who are like, we've been talking about it for 2 years. The numbers aren't changing. Why is that not happening? And I do think people really underestimate how hard it is to get water from the river.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And on that note, let's talk a bit about your team, because in many ways, like I said earlier, you're ahead of many other AI companies in the sense that you're already working with a wide variety of companies in different sectors, and you're actually helping them, either generate savings or generate new revenue or revenue faster. And part of that is deep tech, and you've got an R&D team, and we can talk about that. But also part of it is the team that interfaces with these customers and helps them. And so talk a bit about how big your team is, how you've had to hire, what have you learned on that kind of, what kind of skill sets do you need? You mentioned it a little bit earlier, but it'd be great to go into more depth.
So we're almost 300 people. And for us, the type of folks that we've been trying to hire are engineers who can talk to customers and customer-facing go-to-market people who are really deep in product.
Right.
So we've got a bunch of solution architects, but they're not running demos. They're doing like a lot more complex stuff for customers. And so our non-technical folks in the company are really good at taking business problems and potential opportunities and actually like just live starting to build and construct right what it could actually look like. Because once you are hands-on, right, let's give you an example. You are with the CEO of a pharma company and you're talking about medical affairs types of problems. Being able to actually take something they're working on, right, literally a report that someone is working on, and show like how you can query a body of data that they have worked, or research papers, to create, a kind of initial draft of a document that goes into kind of their medical affairs pipeline. Or you are on the commercial side, and you could show them how you could build an app that uses our visual model to automatically use AI to review an advertisement that has no words on it, just images, right, for compliance with FDA guidelines. And actually doing that live, right, shows a couple of things. One, it makes AI real. And for most folks, their only experience with AI is ChatGPT.
Right.
At best.
Which is kind of fun and gay, and like it's a toy, right? It's a great toy.
It's so fun. And
it's a cool demo.
It's a great demo, and it's great for folks to understand what's possible. But then, like, how does it help me in ways that wouldn't be easier for me to just do it myself, right? And really helping them see how it can replace, right, their processes. And then the other thing that it shows is how critical a skill this is, working with AI is, for the next 10, 20 years of life, right? And what we say is, if you can write it, if you can describe it, you can build it. And not everybody is going to build with AI, but there are going to be way more people who consider themselves builders, right, than is possible today. We are really democratizing access to AI, and it's going to really broaden the definition, right, of who builds tooling inside of a business. And so, the customers have to be able to see that it's not transforming with AI isn't going to be as easy as buying a shitload of API calls. That it is behavior change. And so, just in their engagement with us, we provide the scaffolding for that. Like our people represent that.
Right.
And we get real very quickly with them. And so, they're able to see the promise of what's possible.
Yeah. And your people, by the sounds of things, your team embodies that need for change behaviorally as well, right? Because as you're saying, you're hiring people who are technical people, but who think very commercially, or vice versa. Right. And that's really where we need to go, right? Which for me is one of the super exciting things about this. I mean, as an ex-software developer, what I loved about software and being a programmer was that it was an incredibly creative tool, right? I mean, with this knowledge that I had, I could make stuff. But what was always very limiting about that industry was that only a certain number of people had access to that tool. And it was sufficiently complex that, it was always going to be limited. There's always going to be a ceiling, right? And AI starts to blow holes through that ceiling. And there are so many more, it's such a broader swath of enterprise work that can be productized, right, than like what would be worth doing in code, right? Especially for processes that have to be tweaked, right, constantly, right? Like you're not going to tweak a piece of code that often, right? And as a business user, wouldn't be able to, right? Great. Cool. So obviously you're super busy right now, because there's a lot of promise in this whole area. And as you said, Writer is one of the few companies that's really got a solution that works for large enterprise. So unsurprisingly, you're dealing with a lot of demand. But if I can ask you to look further ahead, for now, you're probably just going to soak up a lot of that demand. But 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead, what are the one or two things technologically that you see coming down the line that you think are going to change things again?
Yeah, I'm really excited for
Yeah.
really using our brains as the interface.
Okay.
So Wasim knows I'm not done with him on this journey until I'm sending emails from the shower with my head.
Okay.
So, how do you really turn everything that happens inside of your business into a process, right? And a process that AI could run if you wanted it to. It used to be that we would say AI was for the repetitive, right, for drudgery. But now it is really clear, right, that we are going to be surpassed very soon. And one person's drudgery is another person's creative passion.
Okay.
So, are we in 5 to 10 years going to live in a place where at work, things you like doing, you actually do handmade, analog, right? And things you hate doing, your AI does for you.
Right.
We are building voice activation into all of our applications. I think so much of work goes screenless, right? And the actual decisions that you make about work, right, happen above the actual software layer. I think decisions will be made by AI as well. And so what's left for humans to do at work is agree. That becomes the most human thing, is that there is a human agreement on what the goals are, what we're trying to do, how we're going to do these things. And so much of the execution actually happens autonomously.
That's really interesting, right? So just philosophically, I think automation has always been about taking something which you can repeat almost identically, that happens lots of times, and that's where you automate, right? So you look at an organization and you say, oh, everyone, the car moves from there to there, and we put a wheel on it. That like a robot should do that, right? And that's what happens. And then with software, it's the same thing. Oh, that kind of transaction happens all the time, so that one we should automate. But then we've left, huge swathes of what we do with people, because it's just simply not that repeatable. What you're saying is what AI really does is it kind of makes that granularity required for automation finer and finer and finer.
Correct.
So things that you think of as being not that repeatable or a little bit different every single time suddenly become something you can automate.
Yes, correct.
And then the choice becomes not so much, is this something that's worth automating? Because actually you can do that with anything, but it's more, which things do I want to automate?
Right.
Or which things do I want to keep for myself?
Exactly. Yeah,
and that's pretty crazy new way to think, right? For most enterprises. I think.
Yeah. And I think 5 to 10 years, in a lot of ways, it's going to look like cloud, this next transformation, right? You look at, you've got lots of companies totally in the cloud and lots of the Fortune 500 still making their transition, right? And like that has been 15 years.
Sure.
And so I think even in the same company, we will still have folks who are really just getting started and folks are doing things the way we're talking about.
Right.
I do think that it's going to become really hard to employ young people in industries where folks have to work late, work on the weekend, do things analog, especially if they're uninspiring.
Yeah.
And a lot of the customers that we talk to in financial services can't hire enough people for those contact centers, right?
Right.
Where you need to have pretty sophisticated folks on the phone answering questions and trying to sell stuff.
Yeah.
And so how do you make the people that you do hire have a much more interesting time, right? I think it'll be a competitive advantage to have an AI-enabled team. And not every team will be, super AI-enabled inside of a company, because it is so hard. It is so complex. And it's not just technology. Like, if we paused all LLM progress and didn't build agents, we would still be digesting this technology in 10 years at most companies.
Yeah, absolutely. And for you, the challenge then is really finding the ones that can digest it today. And starting there and slowly spreading.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, maybe not so slowly.
Well, it can go fast,
Yeah,
right? But you
yeah.
do need the right operating model.
Right.
We always say at Writer that generative AI hates matrices
Mhm.
because, if you've got a use case that scales and it scales across language, scales across geographies, scales across business lines. And so do you have an executive team and an operating structure that can take advantage of that? And so I think, the most innovative companies are going to grow even faster, take even more market share. And the folks who have invested in cloud and in digital and innovation, and we see it already, right? Our customers are Salesforce and Accenture and United Healthcare and L'Oreal and Kenvue, and folks who have been innovative for years, not just with AI.
Yeah, yeah. This is great. Thank you so much, May. We could talk for hours.
Thanks, Suranga.
I think one of the most fascinating things for me is this realization I've got in talking to you that, of course, the technology is driving all of this, but actually, a lot of it is also about how well set up is an organization to actually exploit it fully, and companies, particularly large companies, are going to have to really rethink a lot of that, which is amazing. So, thanks again for coming on and being on What's Next.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.